So here's the thing about Death Valley. Everyone thinks it got this name because it's one of the hottest places on Earth. And yeah, it is insanely hot. We're talking 134 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 56.7 Celsius for the rest of the world. But that's not why it's called Death Valley. The real story, it's way darker. And it starts in the winter of 1849 with a group of people who were desperately trying to find a shortcut to California during the gold rush, and they made one of the worst decisions in American frontier history. Let me paint you a picture of where we are. Death Valley sits right on the border between California and Nevada in the northern Mojave Desert, and it's trapped, literally trapped between four mountain ranges. The Panamint Range to the west, the Amargosa Range to the east, the Grapevine Mountains to the north, and the Owl's Head Mountains to the south. Now here's where it gets weird. Despite being surrounded by mountains, Death Valley contains the lowest point in North America. Badwater Basin sits 282 feet below sea level. That's 86 meters down. And this creates a perfect storm of misery. When the sun heats the ground, the hot air rises, but it gets trapped by the surrounding mountains and atmospheric pressure. So it circulates back down, again and again. It's like nature designed a convection oven specifically to cook anything that enters it. And the ground itself? It's mostly alkaline desert soil. Basically nothing can grow there. The mountains around it reflect the heat back down. And because it's so dry, we're talking about a place that gets less than 2 inches of rain per year, and some years 0 rain. There's no moisture to moderate the temperature. The temperatures don't just get hot here. They get consistently, reliably, impossibly hot. On July 10, 1913, a thermometer at Furnace Creek hit 134 degrees Fahrenheit. For decades, meteorologists believed a reading in Libya was higher, but in recent years, the World Meteorological Organization determined that was a measurement error. So Death Valley holds the record, the hottest air temperature ever reliably recorded on Earth. I talked to park rangers there, and they told me that in summer, when forecasts show temperatures above 125 degrees, they're not worried about people hiking. They're worried about people getting out of their air-conditioned cars for 5 minutes. One ranger told me about a TV crew that came to film during a heat wave. They set up a frying pan on the ground with a thermometer. Surface temperature, 153 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 70 Celsius. Hot enough to cook an egg, hot enough that your camera equipment starts malfunctioning, hot enough that the frames of your sunglasses get so hot you can't wear them. One ranger put it this way: "We're not concerned if we'll have to rescue someone. We're concerned about how many." Another park official, a woman named Carol Wendler, told me something that stuck with me. She said, "Most people don't drink enough water. They don't realize that the place isn't just hot, it's dry. Your body is losing fluids at an incredible rate, and by the time you feel thirsty, you're already in trouble." But before we get to how this place got its name, we need to talk about the people who were here first. Because Death Valley wasn't always synonymous with death. The Timbisha Shoshone lived in this valley for at least 1,000 years, maybe longer. And they didn't just survive here, they thrived. They knew where the water was. They knew which plants were edible. They knew when to move to higher elevations in summer and return to the valley floor in winter. They had a relationship with this landscape that was built on generations of accumulated knowledge. To them, this wasn't Death Valley, it was home. But then came the 1840s. Gold was discovered in California, and suddenly, tens of thousands of Americans were racing west, desperate to get rich. Most of them had absolutely no idea what they were getting into. In October 1849, a wagon train called the San Joaquin Company set out for California, led by a guy named Jefferson Hunt. They were following a well-established route called the Old Spanish Trail. It was long, it was slow, but it was relatively safe. And that's where the problem started. See, some members of the group were getting impatient. Winter was coming, and they'd all heard the story of the Donner Party, a group of pioneers who, just 3 years earlier, had tried taking a shortcut to California and got trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains during a snowstorm. The Donner Party had followed a route promoted by a man named Lansford Hastings, who claimed to know a faster way west. He didn't. They got stuck in the mountains. Almost half of them died. Some resorted to cannibalism to survive. It was one of the most infamous disasters in American westward expansion. Everyone knew about it, so these travelers in 1849 were terrified of getting stuck in the mountains during winter. But they also believed they could find a faster route. They thought they could avoid the Donner Party's fate by taking a different shortcut. Then they met another small group on the trail who showed them a hand-drawn map. It supposedly came from experienced mountain men and trappers. It showed a shortcut that would cut 500 miles and potentially months off their journey. Jefferson Hunt took one look at it and said, "Absolutely not." He went on a scouting mission to check it out, came back almost dead from dehydration, and told everyone he was sticking with the old Spanish trail. But most of the group didn't believe him. They thought they knew better. So they split off and headed into the desert, following that hand-drawn map. Here's the thing about that map. The route it showed didn't exist. At first, everything seemed fine. The terrain was manageable. They were making good progress. They probably felt vindicated, like they'd made the right choice. But then the landscape started changing. Water became harder to find. The ground turned rough and rocky. The group started arguing about which direction to go. They split up again. One faction, a group of younger single men who called themselves the Jayhawkers, decided to push west to find that trail the mountain men had supposedly used. The other group headed towards some mountains, hoping to find water. One of the Jayhawkers, a man named Sheldon Young, wrote about what they were seeing. Grass is scarce, timber none. It is a country of very doubtful appearance. That might be the understatement of the century. By December 1849, both groups stumbled into a massive valley surrounded by mountains on all sides. The ground was covered in salt. The water they found was so alkaline it made them sick to drink it. They were in Death Valley. They just didn't know it yet. The Jayhawkers killed their own oxen for food and water, then walked out on foot. Eventually, they found a Native American who guided them to safety. But the other group, the one with the families, the women, and the children, they tried to go the opposite direction. Things went from bad to catastrophic. A freak snowstorm gave them temporary relief from dehydration. But then their oxen started dying from exhaustion and thirst. Men started dying too, some from dehydration, some from hypothermia as they tried to cross the mountains. The group that had split off to find water, several of them froze to death on the trail they chose, in the desert, because at high altitude, even in the Mojave, winter nights are brutally cold. Think about that for a second. These people came looking for a shortcut to California's gold fields. They ended up in a place so extreme that some died from heat and dehydration, while others froze to death just miles away. Everyone except a few families eventually managed to stagger out of the valley, but several families remained, stranded at the bottom of the valley, too weak to continue, too exhausted. Their supplies nearly gone. They waited there. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into over a month. Finally, 2 young men volunteered to go for help. They crossed the Panamint Mountains on foot and went to find supplies. When they came back, more than a month later, the remaining survivors were mostly women and small children, barely alive. The rescuers led them out of the valley, over the mountains, to safety. As they crested the Panamint Range for the last time, one of the survivors, we don't know exactly who, turned back, looked at the valley that had nearly killed them all, and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley." The name stuck. So let's go back to that temperature record, because here's where it gets controversial. On July 10th, 1913, a weather observer at Furnace Creek recorded 134 degrees Fahrenheit. For over a century, it's been recognized as the hottest temperature ever measured on Earth. But modern meteorologists have serious doubts.
We've never seen anything like this.
Christopher. Bert, a weather historian, analyzed the 1913 reading and found something weird. The temperature didn't match readings from nearby weather stations. Even accounting for Death Valley's unique geography, the variation was too extreme. He wrote, "It is possible to demonstrate that a temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit at Death Valley on July 10th, 1913 was essentially impossible from a meteorological perspective." His theory? Either the equipment malfunctioned or there was observer error. But here's the thing. The World Meteorological Organization, which validates these records, still recognizes it as official. They invalidated the Libya reading from 1922, but kept the Death Valley one. So the debate continues, which brings us to the present day. Because despite everything, despite the name, despite the heat, despite the danger, people keep coming here. About 1 million visitors every year. I talked to a French family who drove there planning to camp. They said after 5 minutes outside their car, they abandoned that idea completely and checked into a roadside hotel instead. It was an excellent experience, the father told me, laughing. The hottest experience of our lives.
absolutely
Park rangers have
incredible.
to constantly
Before you
warn
start your
people
hike,
about the
please be
danger.
aware of the extreme
Carol
cold.
Wendler, a park
Carry plenty
official,
of
explained
water,
it to
at
me.
least 3 liters per
Most
person,
people don't drink
and
enough
watch for loose
water.
rock on the
They don't
trail.
realize the place isn't just hot, it's dry. Your body loses fluids incredibly fast, and people don't notice until it's too late. During
The
heat
heat wave
waves,
continues
news
to
crews
shatter
make
records across
pilgrimages
the
there,
region. We're
hoping to
standing on
witness a
peak
new
that is
world
currently
record.
measuring over
They put
111
frying
degrees,
pans on the
hot enough
ground
to
with
fry an egg
thermometers.
in mere minutes.
One reading showed 153 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 70 Celsius on the surface. But here's what's fascinating. Despite being one of the most hostile environments on Earth, Death Valley is stunning. Mesquite flat sand dunes roll in perfect waves, framed by mountains. The sand is soft, golden, almost inviting, until you step onto it and feel the heat radiating through your shoes. Artist Palette is a section of rock formations painted in surreal colors, reds, purples, greens, yellows, created by different minerals in the soil. It looks like something from another planet. There's a trail through Golden Canyon that leads to a formation called the Red Cathedral, on towering rock walls that glow crimson in the right light. And then there's Badwater Basin itself. This vast expanse of white salt crust, stretching to the horizon, sitting 282 feet below sea level. The lowest point in North America, one of the driest places on Earth. It receives less than 2 inches of rain per year. Some years, it doesn't rain at all. At night, when the heat finally breaks, the sky explodes with stars. Because there's no light pollution, no moisture in the air, nothing between you and the universe. So here's what Death Valley really is. It's a place that got its name from disaster. From people who took a wrong turn, who trusted the wrong map, who thought they could outsmart a landscape they didn't understand. But it's also a place that draws people in, generation after generation, because we're fascinated by extremes. We want to stand at the lowest point, experience the highest temperature, test ourselves against the harshest environment, and underneath all of that, there's the deeper story of the Timbisha Shoshone who knew this land intimately, who survived and thrived here for a millennium before settlers arrived and gave it a name based on their own failure to adapt. Today, Death Valley National Park is protected. Park rangers work overtime during heat waves, warning tourists, conducting rescues, trying to prevent the valley from living up to its name. Because that's the thing about Death Valley. It's beautiful. It's extraordinary. It's one of the most unique landscapes on Earth. But it earned its name. And 174 years after those pioneers barely escaped with their lives, it remains exactly what they called it, Death Valley.